Thanks for all the questions, everybody. And as always, if you want your question answered on the next video, get them in now, get them in below. Put a like and then comment below with your question and I'll do my best to answer it on the next one. Let's get on with the questions. Right, Robert Wren asks, would Preston be interested in making a short shank, straight point, outturned eyed hook for feeder fishing? Funny enough, it's something that I've actually suggested because I think it'd be a great hook. I've got a feeling that a straight point would work really well for hair rigging. No one does that anymore. It's everyone wants like a beaked point. Probably better for reducing fish loss, but I do think a straight point probably would hook the fish better. Something maybe for the future. Craney asked about the new Sonia Baits 1 mils. How would you go about preparing them for bream and skimmers on the cage? They're a little bit like ground bait they are to prepare. Because they're so small, you need to almost add water little and often. You can't really just flood them with water and expect them to take it on because the physical size isn't there for them to absorb it. So give them a good wetting, almost like ground bait, stir them around, give them 10 minutes, just see how they're getting on. If you need to add a bit more, but treat them a bit like ground bait and you won't go far wrong. I have a question. What's your ground bait? Your video on ground baits, and I have a question. Is there a real reason pellets are crushed and made into ground bait? I've always wondered why the powder ingredients are made into pellets and crushed back into powder. Obviously the pellets are manufactured. It's a good question, this. Pellets are manufactured to include all of the things that fish like. They're obviously essentially from fish rearing. That's where the pellets come from in the first place. So they've got all the vitamins, the ingredients, the right proteins, the right fats, the right oil content, all that stuff. So actually crushing them up is obviously a surefire way of getting a successful ground bait. I think it's probably a cost-effective way of producing ground bait. It's an effective, more importantly, it's an effective way of producing ground bait. Obviously all the Sonia Baits ground baits are crushed pellet based of various forms. We don't just buy a sack of screttings, for example, and run them through a blender. We have our own specific pellets made to our requirements. That's how we do that. And it's just a great way of producing a really nice pellet. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I'm not familiar with how pellets are made. I don't know whether I'm not sure, so I couldn't possibly answer that one. Who knows? Let's just say that however they do it at Sonu, it works. Nigel wants to know, are the ignition quiver tips stronger than the old Tyson ones? Yes, that was a massive improvement. And actually Tyson replacement tips are now the same as the ignition ones, much stronger than the old Tyson ones are. Graham wants to know what the difference is between the response power, super power and margin power top kits are. It's just a strength thing, and the power and the super power ones were really strong, but the power ones were plenty strong enough in my experience. That's all I had with my pole, hence why now for the Superior range we've just done one carp kit rather than having super power and margin power. We've just got one carp kit. So no matter which one of those that you want to pick, they'll be plenty strong enough for whatever elastic, and it's just a case of they're just getting stronger. Damo says, I've got an old 410 Prototype 14.5 metre pole. Will any of the Prototype top kits fit my pole? Yes, all of the Prototype Edge Monster top kits will still fit that, no problem. Simon Chaddock wants to know what are my opinions on a Daiwa TDR 4012 QD and the lack of mag sealed. I'm not into like saying bad things about other companies' products or good things. It's not really my place to say on that one, Simon. So I'd ask someone who knows. It wouldn't really be fair because everyone would say I'm biased either way. So I'll pass on that one. But my experience with TDR reels is they're brilliant. So take from that what you will. Duncan Arnold says, my question is about deep water pole fishing. The lake we fish in the winter matches is 10 to 16 metres deep. Wow. Blooming hell, it must be like a bomb hole. Could you give advice on shotting and rigs? Plus, what ground bait mix would you advise? Mixed bags of skimmers, roach and perch. Wow, what a venue. I'd like to know where that is, Duncan. Let me know, and maybe we could do some filming there. That sounds amazing. 10 to 16 metres deep. I've got to be honest, I've never fished a venue that deep. Shotting, I think you'd have to keep it simple. Heavier droppers. You might need bulks of 2 and 3 number 8s rather than a single number 8. I think a single number 8 with a massive volivette of say 4 to 6 gram might tangle and hang up. So you'd probably want big rigs, 4 gram, 5 gram, 6 gram maybe. And then I would double up and even in some cases triple up my droppers. So I've got little bulks of three, number 8s, just to give me the right ratio of weight down the line to stop tangles. If you can get hold of them, because you've got to use such a big float in them circumstances, I would try and get some big pencil floats. They would work really well. Big floats, even in deep water, will make you miss bites, especially on lakes because there's no tow or anything. So you will miss bites. So if you could find some, they'd be very hard to find, but if you could find or even make some really long 3 to 6 gram pencil floats, which I'm sure you're going to need in that kind of depth, then they might be worth looking at. Ground bait wise, I think you're going to need something really sticky and something heavy. So you're definitely going to want a lot of soil in your mix, molehill soil, Teddy Riviere, that kind of thing. You're definitely going to want 50% of that in your mix, I would have thought, just to get your bait down. And then something sticky like Black River or even the new Sweet Skimmer. Either of them with plenty of soil in, I'm sure would do the job. I wouldn't be looking to lose feed in that depth. Although there probably would be the option of catching a few on like maggots shallow. If you sprayed maggots, you might catch some roach and stuff shallow. But I would be looking to try, initially at least, on my first match there, I'd be looking to try and fish positively on the bottom. Ground bait balls packed full of feed, nice big float over the top. I think that'd be good. Mike Bennett says, one of the biggest gripes I have about press innovations is the marketing. You view the consultants on YouTube using the latest tackle. It's not available to public and you have to pre-order. Before you blink, they join a long list of out-of-stock products. For example, the response thing. What are the chances of me getting hold of new Superium short stops? Well, Mike, it's a double-edged sword this is, because the fact that you want to pre-order it and it also sells out quick means that I'm doing my job right. So it's almost a compliment that. Stock is an issue though. It will be for the foreseeable. We are resolving it. We're ordering in much larger quantities now. Obviously the supply chain's been dismal over the past 2 years due to the pandemic. Not making excuses, it just has been. As we all know, you can't even get certain staples in the supermarket. But yeah, the marketing's a funny one because at the end of the day, my job is to drum up business. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to get people excited in a product to go into the shop and either order it or buy it. So it's my fault. And now I've got no control over stock and stuff. So that's out of my hands, unfortunately. Can you or one of the other Preston anglers do a feature on fishing a silty venue? Not a commercial, maybe just some bream and the odd F1 and carp. Yeah, that's a good point. It's something I'll definitely do with Des next year because I know he talks a lot about that, fishing on silt and hard bottoms and stuff. It's not always as easy as just finding hard bottom because on a lot of the venues there isn't. There's some really nice ones around here actually. I might try and do one. Castle Ashby's not far away from here. Cannons Ashby's not far away from here. Both very old silty estate lake type venues. Might be nice for me to go and do something there. Great idea with Q&A, thank you very much. What, in your opinion, is the best ground bait to use on commercials for silvers during winter? F1 Dark by a mile. F1 Dark. So that's the questions caught up with from the first time I asked. I actually overlooked them on the last video, unfortunately, sorry about that. So let's go on to the next ones. Terry Huxley wants to know, what is the difference between Teddy Riviere and Teddy Salmon, which is best to use to put a cloud in the water? Right, Teddy Riviere is essentially soil, like a heavy soil. It's not like molehill. It's I don't know if it's better quality or whatever, but it's quite heavy, dense soil. And then the Teddy Salmon is actually leam, so it's totally different material. Leam is what you want for clouding. Leam doesn't have the binding properties that soil does. Soil will clag together in a ball and obviously give you a lot of weight. Leam will give you weight, but it's not as obvious as soil. And the leam, will give you a nice cloud. So if you are looking, that's why traditionally something like Census Lake and leam works well. Our lake with leam, any ground bait with leam works well for skimmers because it gives off a nice sort of milky cloud off the mix without being anything artificial. It's just when the fish get grubbing around in it, it puffs up a lot of cloud. So that's what a lot of anglers use leam for. And it can be really effective. I've had loads of great days combining F1 Dart with black leam. That was one of my secrets a few years ago when I was doing a lot of skimmer fishing. Hi Joe, just bought some 4x10 Chiantis in 2 different outlets recently. When I went to the shop, the first one, I thought it was taking a lot of shots, so I compared it to the original one I had. Yeah, the floats are a little bit bigger. Des did the shotting on all the floats, and he wanted them standardised across the range, so every float takes exactly the same. So if it's a 4x10 Chianti, F1 maggot, F1 pellet, they all take exactly the same. They're a little bit bigger than the old ones because the old ones are a bit light, which is a bit unfortunate, but I know what you mean. They are a bigger float. My advice would be, if you want some tiny ones, try and get your hands on some of the older ones. But the 4x10 new ones fish beautifully. They're just bigger than the old ones. That's the top and bottom of it. Glyn Maddox, you use distance measuring sticks to maintain accuracy. Why don't you measure to the clip on the reel? I'll explain further. You put your feeder over the measuring sticks, wrap the line around the required distance. Now, instead of just clipping the line now, as people usually do, why not Watson? By doing it in a commercial way. Yeah, I think he's basically saying that when you do your distance sticks, you're not accounting for the length of between the tip and the line clip. You kind of are, because I always stand in the same place when I do it, and it's to the same point anyway. So you're adding that extra bit on. So it's, as long as you're doing it consistently yourself, it doesn't really matter, does it? That's the top and bottom of it. Paul Castle, my pole has only got an elasticated top 2 with the rest of the sections put over. What would you suggest for extra top sets? I'm not sure, Paul, on that one, what you're trying to ask there. If you'd comment in this one with a bit more detail, I should be able to help. Paul Thompson says, great Q&A, Joe. Bit more punchy than the ones you do with Des. No disrespect to Des, but he waffles on a lot. He does waffle on a lot, but that's why you all love him. Michael Adams, do you know when the 4-wheel shuttle will be back in stock? Non-availing in Belgium. We've just had a big shipment of them, so I noticed shops over here have had them recently. So hopefully you'll have had a few over in Belgium as well. Obviously it takes a little bit of time to filter through, but we have had some. So hopefully you'll have had some over there as well. Carolee Fodor, sorry if I've ruined your name there, but Carolee, how frequently do you fish in England like you would do on some continental waters, like big-bodied wagglers above 12 gram, big flat floats? Most of the videos are about commercial fishing. Despite all this, England has such good results on international events. It's a really funny one, this, because Zolt, who's just joined Press Innovations and working with me, is from Hungary, and we were talking about waggler fishing the other week, and his preconceived idea of waggler fishing in the UK was to use the big, long floats with the body on, the weight at the bottom, the adjustable weight, like they do on the international matches. And to be fair, in England, that they, in France they call it anglaise fishing. That's waggler fishing. It's couldn't be further from the truth. I can't remember anybody really doing that kind of fishing over here. We always fished insert wagglers, 2 AAA, 3 AAA, a couple of swan, that kind of thing. So it's kind of a bit of a misconception, that, Carolee, that we ever fish like that. There's an odd event, international style over here, where we've got to use floats like that, maybe a slider, flat floats. But to be honest, all that kind of fishing is thin on the ground over here. The reason why most videos are commercial based or not using international style tactics is because those matches don't exist over here. Not really. There's an odd one, but not really. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with that. And the fact that our lads still do so well in Europe is credit to them, really, and the hard work that they put in outside of their own fishing matches, because they put the effort in to go and learn those tactics. Because at the end of the day, we're tapping pellets in and pinging pellets in, not fishing flat floats on a river or feeder fishing with longhook clamps and stuff like that. We're basing our fishing on commercials, really. So yeah, it's credit to the England lads that they actually do as well as they do, really. Someone wants to send me a Leicester City mug. Leicester, I've got a bit of a soft spot for Leicester. I'd never support them, but they're kind of my second team, Leicester. I've got to be honest, I do like them. Richard Grove wants to know, with depth and distance in mind, what's your general rule of thumb when selecting the correct length and weight of traditional waggler? A lot of things to consider. Conditions, obviously wind's a big one. The last thing you want whenever waggler fishing is bow forming, because you'll miss bites and presentation will suffer. Either the float will drag towards you, drag away, drag to the side. So whatever float you use, it needs to boss the conditions. It needs to allow you to keep a nice straight line to the float. If that's on the river, might be chucking well downstream, so you can keep in perfect contact with it. So I'm just like constantly looking. I like to go a little bit heavier on my float size to ensure that I keep a straight line, rather than some anglers use a really light float to try and get a really delicate presentation. I prefer to use a bigger float and boss the conditions and boss the river and boss the lake. So if anything, if it helps, look at the float that you think's right for the conditions that comfortably gets you there. Then I go one size float bigger. That's how I do it. And even recently, I've been fishing on the river, on the Avon float, the roach fishing thing, and I've been trying to fish really nice little stick floats and that, I'm not really catching. And then you put on a dirty, great big Avon float with loads of lead down the line, and you get bites. So sometimes I think we get a bit carried away with light floats, especially when it comes to river fishing. Sometimes a heavier sort of float can work really well. Loving the new river vlog. How do you choose what type of feeder you use? Quite an open question, that, isn't it? It depends really. I think on natural fishing, the new hex mesh rocket and the window are pretty much all you need. Obviously, wire cages come into it fishing closer, and then on the method style feeder, if I'm fishing for lots of fish up against islands, sort of looking to build a swim, I'll always use a proper method feeder like the ICS method. If I'm just looking to catch a handful of fish, putting one cast in and leaving it, then I'll use one of like the Banjo XR types. I think that's a nice little way. Jeffrey says he fishes a natural venue with millions of fry in the top foot and the bigger roach and bream on the bottom are on the bottom. The fry are intercepting the bait on the way down. How do I counteract this? Well, definitely try and concentrate all your feed through ground bait, hard ground bait, get it on the bottom. Try topping up bigger amounts less often so that everything is hard on the bottom and there's no reason for them fish to be intercepting anything up in the water. So it may mean that it takes a little bit longer to catch on the bottom because you're putting more bait in, but it'll stop them little fish. If you're loose feeding in a situation like that or using any soft ground bait or anything like that, you're just asking for problems with that. Use heavy rigs. One tip I've learned over the years, don't like plop your rig on the water because small fish love to go straight at the noise. Try and do it delicately if you can, just to try and sneak the bait past them. If that fails, tighten your bulk right down. It might look crude, but sometimes it's the only way to get through small fish. You know, fish with your hook and your shot and your bulk really tight together. So bring the bulk down, maybe an Olivet, 1 or 2 droppers, bigger droppers, just anything you can to get through them small fish can work. And obviously the feeding, getting it on the bottom is really important. Hi Joe, when are new neoprene boots in the shops? I think they're coming in second week in Jan, but I'm not 100% sure on that, but definitely soon. Stephen Armstrong, thanks for the answer. What would be your starting hook length feeder fishing on a Trent? Again, it's a bit depends really, but I would always start on 016 as my first 2 or 3 casts on the Trent would always be with 016. You never know, you could hook a barbel, you could hook a bream, big chub, anything like that, and oftentimes your bonus fish will come first or second chuck, so you need something on that'll give you a chance of getting it out. I would then drop down to 012, 014, 010 even in certain circumstances to try and catch a dace and roach and stuff, and then step it up again later in the match once you've built the swim up for the bigger fish. That's where I would probably go for, because obviously the big fish, unless you're on an absolute flyer, but your best chance of a big fish is the first 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes, so make sure you've got the right kit on for them two spells. Dave Porter's, I've tried this is a follow-on from one I answered last week. I've tried freezing ground bait lately. I found that when thawed, it just doesn't bind the same. Yeah, that's what I found. It's the same even like liquidized bread and stuff like that. It never seems to have that tack ever again. If you're using it, I think I said last time, if you're using it down the ground, down the edge, putting it in loose, not a problem. But if you are looking to freeze ground bait for the next session, just bear in mind that it won't bind again. It won't really bind properly ever again. So, but it's fine if you're just going to use it loose. But if you're going to use it around a method, and that could affect it. Dave P62 wants to know how that sack of hemp is from my dad. It's actually really nice bit of hemp. Hisham Adam wants to know, how do you find river chub? I blanked horribly last season. Maybe it was my cheese paste wasn't smelly enough. Definitely wasn't that. Chub fishing is all about location, as I've found, and conditions. Conditions play a massive part. So, how I went about finding them on the River Nene, because I had nothing to go on, I had no information, nobody told me anything. I just had a rough idea of the areas I probably wanted to fish. If you remember last year, we couldn't go far, so I was limited to where I could go as well. There was that to consider. So my first port of call was actually going on Google Maps, looking at bits that I really fancied, like the look of, obvious features and areas that look deeper. That I think that is really important. From January to March, they're definitely, not so much in March, but January and February, they're definitely in the deepest water on the stretch. That's what I found. So look for bends, because they tend to be a bit deeper. Deeper water near trees, very, very good. And deeper water in like long straights, anything like that is really effective for chub. Great places to find them. Obvious features is overhanging trees, weir pools, stuff like that. Anything that gives a bit of structure, the chub will be there, providing the depth's good. You can find some shallow water swims that look amazing and just not there. If they are there, they'll be small. So if you just want to get some bites, they'll be fine. But if you want to catch the big ones or better fish, deeper areas, near features, you're not going to go far wrong. So just look at Google Maps, look for areas that look chubby, and you'll find them. You'll find them eventually. Conditions though needs to be talked about. I think I spoke about this before in a previous video. I've been on the stretch where I've had my most success. Any of the rivers are the same, but if the water's clear, with little flow, like it has been recently, your only option is to fish in almost in the dark. So if you don't want to fish in the dark, I wouldn't even bother going, because recently I've tried and I just can't catch them in the day when it's like that. It's just not right. But then the other week we had a flush through, we had a bit of rain, we had some colour, it went in that lovely greeny bluey tinge for a few days, bit of extra pace, and I absolutely sacked up. I went last week and caught 11 up to these great big fish. So I was fishing the same tactics and the same swims, and I was catching them in the day. So look for those chubby areas, keep an eye on the conditions. As soon as you've got some colour in the river, look for it peaking, the level peaking. If you go on, I forget what it is, but if you put river levels in Google, look for the .gov one, because it gives you a proper little graph of how the river level's doing. Look for the river peaking. Hopefully it won't be a too bad a flood, but look for the river peaking, and then as it's dropping, a day or two after the peak, I've found seems to be the best, because it's when that heavy colour drops out. 2 to 3 days after, and over the course of the next sort of week after that, once that heavy colour's gone and you've got a little bit of that sort of bluey greeny tinge in, oh my god, that is just the best chub conditions ever. You'll catch loads. If you can coincide that with a nice low pressure day, you're going to catch loads of chub. Can you get an interview / podcast with Andy Power? A bit of an enigma, that boy. He is an enigma. Great guy though, great guy, great angler, wonderful angler. Yeah, Andy's more than happy to do stuff. It's just organising it to do it with him. So I think I've got 10 days filming to do with him next year. So perhaps I'll try and do like a podcast style thing with him. That would actually be a decent idea. Just watch your video on catching roach, and you talked about only elasticating the top section of the pole, so you only have a short length. Can you explain how you do that? Just really simple. The number one of a Preston pole is just this, I don't know, it's obviously 1.2 meters long. You can buy a little bung, like a proper traditional bung, not a puller bung. Obviously goes in that number one section, and you just elasticate one piece. Simple. But for small fish and roach and stuff, I just prefer to do it that way. I like to have a little bit of control. Dean Bailey says, get the PR412 relaunched in PTFE. Yeah, I'd love that. I would really like that. But sadly, sales on lighter hooks aren't amazing. So maybe it won't happen. But I'd love it for it to happen. That. Been looking at a few autumn winter tactics and came across punch bread with a bomb. Would you recommend just throwing in the bomb bread alone, or would you throw in some ground bait? Definitely throw it in on its own. We've got a video coming up on the Preston YouTube channel with Lee Kerry explaining this. He has a great day's fishing on bomb and bread. The art of that tactic is locating the fish. It's not feeding the fish. So the reason it works is you're presenting a nice visible hook bait where the fish are, rather than you pulling the fish to you. So what you want to be doing is start short, get your bomb, look at your swim, start where you think. If you think the fish are going to be right over against cover or whatever, start a little bit short, see if you can nick a bite or two and work your way over to that cover. Take your time, get in there. If you're on a pleasure session, you just want to catch loads, go straight into the lion's den. But in a match, you need to manage your water, and you're incrementally working towards that with your bomb. And you're using your bomb, looking at your tip, looking for liners, looking for indications to tell you where the fish are. Because in winter, they're grouped together really tightly. And it may be that 90% of the fish in your swim might be in 5% of your peg. They might be in a little cubbyhole or a little bush or out in open water in the deepest bit. They'll be somewhere, and especially in winter, you'll get pegs where a lot of the fish are in one peg. Decoy, just as an example off the top of my head, decoy is a classic example. You could literally be on 70% of the lake stock. It could be in front of you, and then the pegs either side might not have any. So it's all about finding them fish and then presenting that bomb and bread hook bait. So no ground bait whatsoever. Don't put any liquidized bread in or anything like that. It's all about searching that tactic. It's all about searching for where the fish are likely to be and then putting a nice visible hook bait in front of them. James Lawler, how do you convert the Preston tool arm so that the snap locks face upwards? Just if you just take the screw, there's like a wing nut, take that off, the plastic collar comes off, then you can just rotate, slide them all off and then slide them all back on the other way around. As simple as that. Really, really simple. What are the differences between the Superior X50 and X70 for a £500 difference? It's just, obviously, the poles just get better and better. Obviously, the more money you spend, the stiffer they get. The X50 is probably a touch stronger than the X70, but the X70 is definitely stiffer at 14.5 and 16 metres. So it's up to you, really, whether if you fish 14.5 and 16 metres often, I'd go for the 70. If you only fish 14.5 and 16 metres occasionally, I'd go for the X50. It's just picking each pole's strengths, and if you consider that extra cost to be worth it for the fishing you do, that's where I'd say it. And if you fish 16 metres all the time, it is worth looking at the X90. Chris Ponting wants to know, he says, I mentioned using the strangulation knot on Dacron and that you shouldn't use it. Having lost a few rigs now using Duraslip at a Dacron knot, what other knot should I be using? A bog standard little granny knot, like a once overhand knot, that is it, and then lock it into place with the sleeve. That's all I do, and it just stops the elastic. If you do that strangulation, you know the one I mean, like a lot of Dacrons are sold like that, where it's like looped over a stick and you pull it on and then pull it over a knot. It's great, it looks fantastic, but that definitely perishes the elastic over time. So I just put my Dacron on, one overhand knot and pull it tight, and that is it. That's all I've done, and I never had a problem, I must admit. But one thing I've found, that I often use just put my line on the actual elastic and use the bead rather than a Dacron, and that has an advantage as well, because even though you're touching the elastic all the time, you're always seeing the elastic. The problem is with some Dacron connectors, you put them on and then you never check that end, so even if it wears or whatever, you're never going to see it, and eventually you'll lose a fish because you lose a lot. So if you don't want to use a Dacron, or you are concerned about it, try the bead and straight elastic method, because you can, every time you put the rig on, you're looking at the knot and seeing if it's perished or not, and if it is perished a little bit, slide the bead up, tie a new knot in it, and you're away again. So if you are worried about it, try that method. If not, just use that overhand knot on the Dacron. Right, that's it. So thank you again, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks everyone who subscribed. That was quite a long one, a lot of questions. If you do have any questions, get them in below. I'll try to do my best to answer them. It'll probably be after Christmas now, but I'll do another one of these if I get enough questions. So get them in below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and have a great Christmas, everyone.